This is Reverend Dick speaking. I was sitting there this evening, I was reading some news, and I found an old story that I think might be of some interest. What happens when you bring in a bunch of people to a place where they don't belong? And it's a funny story, but it's also a tragic story. Tell me what happens when you have a nation filled with cucks. Yeah, I might as well just get to it. Have a look right here.
Vadå?
Vad är det för knackande? Hej!
Hej!
Vad är det för knackande ljud?
Vadå?
Vad är det för knackande ljud ni håller på med?
Idag eller?
Ja, nu.
Jag vet inte.
För det hörs ändå inte mitt kök.
Vi bara lyssnar musik.
Nej, ett annat ljud.
Vilken gick ingenting.
Va?
Vilken gick in? Kamera. Varför hör du? Jag ska göra kamera. Kamera معاي.
Varför jag kamera?
كاميرا معاي. varför du ser kamera? ما يعني
The Norlandic Symphony of Destiny. Very dramatic. Neighbor terror, systematic aggression, car fires, unprovoked violence. The small community Jämtland with 977 inhabitants can hardly be recognized anymore. It's better to be dead than living here now, the concert organist and composer Jonas Karlsson, 48, told News Today. A couple of weeks ago, it rings in the phone. It's a former colleague from the evening newspaper Expressen. Check this out. Can you do something about this story? Attached to the message is a screenshot from a popular Facebook group. I zoom in on it and think, sure, good thing, but not at the moment. A week later, I presented the idea to our editorial head, Pelle Zackrisson, and thinks I should investigate the matter further. Check with my former colleague, and you will get some background. He did something about this a few years ago, but I think the newspaper chose to put the report to a close, he says. In mid-May, I get in touch with the journalist. He tells me openly and in detail about his interview, gives me the whole background to the drawn-out neighborly feud, and reveals that the man is not alone in the place of feeling dissatisfaction, but also fear over the situation that has arisen. They have waved away this man's concern that it would be immigrant hostility. I have met him, and I find it very difficult to believe that this would be the case because he hates foreigners. He probably feels very disturbed by the neighbor's behavior, he explains. Chaos erupts just a week before the election. Jonas Karlsson. On Facebook, he describes himself as a solo organist, composer, and writer. In 2002, he graduated from the prestigious music conservatory in Trondheim, Norway. The Bach piece I've chosen is among the most difficult I've played, he tells the county newspaper in Östersund ahead of the upcoming concert exam. What he does not know then is that his life, 12 years later, will take a painful turn for the worse. The election campaign in 2014 has entered its absolute final spurt, and there are only days left until the election day. The media is dominated by the threat from the Sweden Democrats, and talk about the fascist wave that swept over Sweden. The big question many chronicles and experts ask is how the established parties should parry the Sweden Democrats, and how to minimize their influence. The election night on September 14th, 2014 becomes chaotic. The Sweden Democrats more than doubled their result from 2010 and received 12.9% of the votes of the Swedish people. The Express grieves Sweden Democratic's records and publishes a night black front page with the message, yesterday, 781,120 Swedes voted for the Sweden Democrats. I had not previously been interested in politics, but I had seen in the debates that people became Nazis and such, but I never really believed in that talk, says Jonas Carlson. A week before the election, he gets new neighbors. They come from Somalia and have been placed next to Jonas' apartment in the old station community in southern Norland. The neighborhood becomes short-lived. He tells of a hellish noise which rises from 8 at the evening, which rarely goes well into the night. From now on, it becomes impossible to sleep properly at night. The first time I heard this, I thought it was a festival that had moved in. He develops. It's like you're in a football game. You build up a similar level of tension. Time enough, it sounds like a zoo, interspersed with chatter and yelling. Since these fuzz sounds like they are throwing each other into the walls. The noise level is so loud that you can hear it 50 meters outside the apartment building. And just that there's no stopping it. It can make sound like a whistle. It's such a fucking hell that I can't even watch TV in the living room anymore. Then I realized why people in Sweden had complained. I hadn't thought of it before, but now I literally ran away and voted for the Sweden Democrats in the election. I was in shock. Paradise, as himself describes the place, is soon transformed into a living hell. Meanwhile, the municipal real estate company describes the small community as an example of successful integration work. Swedish state television decides to record a documentary called Hello Alien, basically Hello Stranger or something like that. Even Expressen, the evening news Aftonbladet, and even the British media giant BBC agrees to the tribute choir and convey the positive Swedish image. But throughout the current term of office, Jonas' problems with the neighbors and landlords have only escalated. Over 50 applications, Jonas now begins to confront his neighbors, who initially do not understand Swedish. He points out that he did so in a friendly way, states that he called on their door at least 12 times during the first year, but that their behavior did not improve despite repeated bouts. It is now that he starts calling Securitas, which is a Swedish security company, but also notifying the neighbors of the municipal real estate organization in Krokom. The municipal, yeah, there you go. For their placement in the northern ideal. The response has been so too. He says that he has made over 50 applications to the above-mentioned real estate companies, but that no one rendered in anything concrete, in addition to a police report against him himself. He has also called Securitas a dozen more times, but explains that it is difficult situation because it often takes time before they show up to the apartment building, and that it must be very loud at the time when the security company arrives, otherwise nothing happens. On one occasion he also called the police, who ignored the report. It was such an extreme noise that I thought it would be good to get the police there. I also think that the neighbors who lived below the Somalis made a report. There were other refugee children in the apartment then. They must have set some kind of world record in noise, but the police ignored the case and did not come. Another noise describes a monotonous tap, which can last for hours. It sounds like they hit a hammer in the wall. Once I walked into their apartment, it looked like they were sitting on the floor, crushing tea with stone. You can imagine you destroy the apartment too, and you don't sit and hit a rock on the floor for several hours. They were probably chewing cat. You should check this shit out. It's basically like a root that the Somalis chew on, not only in Sweden, but also the UK. There are loads of documentaries about it. It's a very light drug. If I had kept on like that, I would have been thrown out of the apartment immediately. Jonas often returns to the many reports he has made to Krokom's Bostäder. He says that the municipal company felt very nervous at first, and that they eventually tried to meet him by offering a second a little further away, by the railroad, second apartment probably, First, they avoided the word refugees. I couldn't use that word. I got a moral sermon every time I said refugees. Instead, I had to use the word child family. Also, I can't move to that second apartment because of my organ, I explained to them. When I chose my current residence, I measured with I don't know what you call them, but it's like a measuring tape thingy, so that I knew I could get the organ through the door. In addition to the digital organ, the apartment now also has a digital piano. I could disturb the whole house if I wanted to. That's 550 watts in my speakers, but I have a built-in cabinet just so there will be no noise mess with my neighbors. I use expensive headphones so as not to disturb anyone when I play. Was notified by the property manager. The fight with Krokenbostäder extends over time. After a while, the staff becomes more and more unpleasant to Jonas. Now you are also starting to pretend that there is no noise and points out that no one else in the apartment building has complained. But this is not true. News today has testimony from the neighbor who lives below the Somalis. And there too is a police report. In an email correspondence with Krokenbostäder former property manager Stefan Jönsson, it appears that the police report was drawn up, but against Jonas Karlsson. Let's see here. I'll have to translate this on the go. Friday, the 5th of February, 2016. Stefan Jönsson wrote, Jonas, I've earlier explained to you that no one else living in the house has come with any sort of complaint. Securitas has, after you've made complaints, after visits on the location, not been able to identify any sort of noise. With this as a ground we stand on, we don't consider it to be enough evidence to start any sort of complaints, and henceforth it is, from a juridical perspective, not possible for us to take further action. This too I have informed you of earlier. In the case that you're unhappy with this answer, I recommend you to turn to it's basically an organization that's supposed to help out people who rent apartments, if you find ground for this. Further on, because of your thread below, I have to inform you that we have reported you to the police. And here is, I will make a video about Stefan Jönsson, and I will dox him on every site, the entire country of Sweden, if he doesn't fix this now. It doesn't take very long before I take that step. Jonas explains this email to Stefan Jönsson that he was pissed off that the municipal company consistently chose to ignore his complaints, and complaints for such a long time. I knew it would pop. Later it came to light that he himself was afraid to get shit. He almost laughed. I'll get on the poor if I evict your neighbors. He then suggested that I contact the rental committee. I met manager Michael Söderström, and we concluded that they would pay for the move of the organ provided that I moved within 3 months. But it is not so easy to find a new place, especially not now when they have already rented everything out to refugees. I can only speculate, but I think he quit because of this. The conflicts with the neighbors, with Krokenbostäder, have hit Jonas hard. During a period, he visits both doctors and psychiatrists. The latter contacts the real estate company to prove that Jonas is 100% credible in his story and is not driven by refugee hatred. They just replied that they offered me a second apartment and then stopped to inquire. I've had a bad fall and will be mentally slowed down if this continues. Below here is the doctor and psychiatrist certificates of Jonas's situation. I'm not going to translate this. I will post the link, and if anyone wants to, they can translate it for themselves. I almost thought about suicide when the neighbors were at their worst. Nobody in my entire life had treated me worse than Krokom Bostäder. They take the price. They have silenced everything, says Jonas. Unprovoked beatings. There are several testimony of abuses in the housing building. During the past 6 months, the small community with almost 1,000 inhabitants have also been shaken by a car fire. And in early May, a man was attacked unprovoked at the railroad track. In this assault, several perpetrators were involved, and the man received multiple blows to the head, according to police. No signal elements are available. Our society is being transformed into a suburb in Stockholm, Jonas notes. One day, he is contacted on Facebook by the mother of a daughter who lives close by to the Somalis. She introduces herself and talks about the difficult situation that has arisen. She also happened to be in the hat with one of the Somali children. I made friends with the kids a couple of times, and I have not been gracious, she writes, adding, there is so much to tell and talk about. Other testimonies tell of cats that have been rolled into the carpet and the refugee children then hit the carpet with wooden blankets. A kitten should also have been stabbed with a wooden spear in the stomach. It is also not uncommon for cats to be chased by the children. According to Jonas, it is not his Somali neighbors who are involved in this, but other refugee children who live a little further away from his neighborhood. I asked the new manager at Krokom Bostäder, Kenneth Carlson, to contact me about the cats, but he never did. Animal aggression is something that we Swedes react very harshly to. Just take this example with the Norwegian woman who tormented dogs in Jämtland. Then it became a life vampire. But now, when it comes to refugee children and cats, and this is totally silenced, you just put the lid on. What evidence do you have that children abuses cats? I've seen it myself. There's a little cat named Lele here in the neighborhood. He usually greets me sometimes. One day I was walking out on the balcony. I saw 2 refugee children standing on the street with pointing wooden sticks. They raised the sticks to strike the cats. I panicked, laced my shoes, and yelled out. At the same time, she, who was the cat guard, and the children screamed that they would not hit this cat, but they just laughed because they knew she cannot chase them because of her walker. On Facebook, a local resident confirms that her cat has been hit by them. She also says that she has had enough and that she intends to move out of the society. Since 2017, Jonas has been posting to a popular Facebook group. He has also written 4 submissions about his situations on the site Avpixlat, now social news. This is an old site where they usually delivered unpixelated news, and there was also a web forum where you could discuss shit openly. People have been doxxed because of their interaction there. Politicians have had to quit. This is at a high social price. He says he has discovered to his dismay that he is no longer welcome to play the organ for the county. I'm frozen out. I'm the county's best organist, and I've been looking for small office services that I have not received despite my qualifications. It's getting slow. I have priests monitoring me on Facebook, it feels like. Some priests have removed me from their friends list. I left as an office in Oviken last year, but one day I called to my manager. When I came to work, I got a reprimand for being a racist because I had written on this pixelated sites. She laughed. It was the worst she had ever seen in her life. Then there was the organ festival in Östersund. I was not even invited. They do not settle for having uncomfortable opinions, but mean that they have Nazi connection. Some people take this very seriously. They think it is better to put the lid on, otherwise brown shirts will benefit. I can no longer cope. That is why I've chosen to go public with this. Have you considered moving from the area? Yes, of course. I just have to get more money together than I have now. I'm going to this is a bad translation by Google, but it's basically salary insurance at the moment. So as soon as I get a job, I move. How has this affected your confidence in politicians? I've never been as disappointed in the government that we have now, considering what they say and how bad it is in reality. Do you think it will be better if there's a new government constellation this fall? I feel that the established parties, with the exception of the Swedish Democrats, are quite similar in the politics, that they give up as soon as help is needed. I have a girlfriend in town who got her daughter raped. The perpetrator, a Somalian, received only 2 months in prison. I think this is going to continue. They will just put the lid on. And I don't trust a second for the moderate party's new leader, Ulf Kristersson. Jonas Karlsson flickers with his eyes. He feels exhausted. The dream of being able to freelance full-time has burst, and the old station community, which he himself described as a paradise as late as 2013, has suddenly transitioned into a pure nightmare. I've been wanting to move here for 6 years. I was looking carefully for an apartment in an undisturbed location close to nature. Only older aunts lived in the house. I usually sat with headphones at my organ or went roller skating. I was really happy that I found my place in life. I wanted to live outside of the box. Now there is nothing left of peace. There is an infernal noise everywhere. They have just fitted more secure locks in the doors. This also applies to the laundry room, where they now have double locks and access cards. It is always broken machines. It's never clean, so I guess they have to keep track of who's been there. Yeah, this is what happens when you bring in a bunch of people that don't belong to your community. A bunch of people that will never respect your laws, your traditions, your way of life. This is a testimony from Sweden. Have a think about this. This has been a Reverend Dick broadcast. Have a good one.